Donald Trump said during the campaign that he was going to be tough on the financial industry. Now, why did he say that? Because he knows that sounding like a progressive actually gets you a lot of votes. And he had threatened to take away a loophole that hedge fund guys had. Now, did he actually take it away? No, he gave them more loopholes. He gave them trillions of dollars in tax cuts. He was lying about that. But he said during the campaign as well, quote, "I'm not going to let Wall Street get away with murder." Okay, good. Now that's positive, especially because there was a LIBOR scandal. I'm going to explain that in a second. Top 5 banks involved, including Deutsche Bank, giant penalties. They got caught. So let's just explain it a little bit. The scandal involved illegally manipulating the London Interbank offered rate, or LIBOR for short, which is used to set the cost of borrowing for a variety of financial transactions. Now that's really, really important because that's how the banks skimmed so much money off the top and away from you. So, I mean, it's the overall scandal is very complicated, but a simple way of explaining it is if they decide together that they're going to set the interest rate, well, they can set it really low for you and high for themselves. So that's what they did. They got caught and they had to pay billions of dollars in fines and probably thought not a big deal. They just gave you part of what they took from you in the first place. Deutsche Bank was apparently the most egregious of all of the banks because they paid the largest fine. So now, good news is, under laws designed to protect retirement savings, financial firms whose affiliates have been convicted of violating securities statutes are effectively barred from the lucrative business of managing those savings. David Sirota reporting that for International Business Times. So that is good news. Okay, these guys are crooks. They stole billions of dollars from people who trusted them and put money in their bank accounts all this time. But hey, then you're not going to get to play around with people's savings accounts because we can't trust you, right? Now, how do you think this is going to turn out? You think the banks are going to get away with murder? Of course. So here's the rest of the story. However, that punishment can be avoided if the firms manage to secure a special exemption from the US Department of Labor, allowing them to keep their status as, quote, qualified professional asset managers, or qualified crooks. Now remember, they admitted to being crooks. They said, yes, we all got together and fixed the rates to screw you out of all that money, okay? Are they going to be deemed qualified anyway? So look, this next quote gives you a perfect sense of Washington. So it involves Obama and Trump. So Sirota explains, in late 2016, the Obama administration extended temporary one-year waivers to 5 banks: Citigroup, JPMorgan, Barclays, UBS, and Deutsche Bank. Late last month, the Trump administration issued new, longer waivers for those same banks, granting Citigroup, JPMorgan, and Barclays 5-year exemptions, and UBS and Deutsche Bank received 3-year exemptions. That right there is Washington in a nutshell, right? Democrats and Republicans do the same exact thing. Democrats are a little bit more savvy about it. They go, I'll extend it for 1 year because it seems more temporary. I mean, I keep extending it every single year, but I do it year by year, so it doesn't seem like I'm letting the banks get away with murder. You never know. One of these days, I could get tough on them. Plus, then they're gonna have to spend a lot of lobbyist money again. And they're gonna have to give me a lot of campaign contributions again. Whereas the Republicans come in and go, no, we're for the bankers. We lied to you during the election. Isn't that obvious? We're for the rich, we're for the bankers. So I'm gonna give Wall Street whatever they want. You want 5 years, take 5 years. Deutsche Bank, I got special dealings with you, 3 years. Enjoy, you were the worst of the worst. Who cares? Make it 3 years anyway. Get away with murder, what do I care? Now, why would Trump want to do Deutsche Bank any favors? Let's find out. Trump owes the German bank at least $130 million in loans, according to the president's most recent financial disclosure form. Sources have told the Financial Times the total amount of money Trump owes Deutsche is likely around $300 million. Now you might say, look, that's a loan, he gets loans from banks. Well, hold right there. No, he doesn't get loans from any Western banks because he's had 6 bankruptcies. He's a total buffoon and no one else will give him a loan except Deutsche Bank and some shady banks in Cyprus and Russia. So, and you know what he did to Deutsche Bank a couple years back? It's like, yeah, I owe you $640 million. I'm Donald Trump, I'm a moron. I went bankrupt again, I'm not gonna pay you. So then they sued one another and then somehow magically they got past it. I don't know how they got past it. The last quote I give you might give you some indication. But they went back to letting him borrow money And it is entirely possible that Trump doesn't have the money to pay them again. So doing them a favor when he's president could be helpful to his cause. In fact, let's give you the longer relationship that he has with Deutsche. The president's relationship with the bank dates back to the late 1990s when it was the one major Wall Street bank willing to extend him credit after a series of bankruptcies. In 2016, the Wall Street Journal reported Trump and his companies have received at least $2.5 billion in loans from Deutsche Bank and co-lenders since 1998. So he has deep ties to Deutsche Bank. At a bare minimum, he should recuse himself. It's a massive conflict of interest. He should say, look, somebody else should make this decision. I'm definitely not part of it because I owe those guys a lot of money. And obviously I've been dealing with them for decades and decades. And at a minimum, even if he doesn't have trouble paying back the loans, he has that enormous financial interest in that particular bank. It's insane that he lets them off the hook and there's nothing we could do about it. It's the most obvious conflict of interest there is. Now, but is Deutsche Bank connected to Russians? And if you got my sense of why Deutsche Bank might have let him off the hook earlier, well, if they did a lot of business with the Russians, maybe they'd be making money from another part of the bank and hence not as tough on Trump if Trump were to be helping the Russians financially for all that time. If. Well, let's find out if Deutsche Bank does have any connections to Russia. Deutsche Bank was fined $425 million by New York State for laundering $10 billion out of Russia. So it's not just that some Russians have money in Deutsche Bank, that's nothing. Russian oligarchs have money in Deutsche Bank, something. No, but that alone would be, you raise your eyebrow, okay? No, in this case, they've already been fined $425 million for money laundering for the Russians. It was nicknamed the global laundromat. And Trump also has his money in the same part of the bank. Look at those wild coincidences. Trump connected to the Russians through Deutsche Bank and then doing favors for Russia, which is another story we have today where one of his staffers wanted to immediately remove our military from the parts of Europe that were near Russia, let alone the fact that he still hasn't enforced the sanctions that he signed into law, that he was forcing to sign into law, all those favors for Russia, talking about how we got to take it easy on Russia, and then favors for Deutsche Bank. I'm sure it's a wild coincidence. So if you think there's no evidence connecting them, you're not paying attention. So that's not a direct email saying, I will do this for Deutsche Bank and the Russians because I'm a money launderer. Now we'll see if Mueller can find something like that, and more importantly, can find the paper trail of where the money goes, okay? But in terms of evidence out in the open, there is plenty of evidence out in the open that they had a deal and Trump is already delivering his end of the bargain as president. Of course, to the great detriment of the American people, but to his benefit. If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join.